Breaking news, the New York Attorney General is now announcing that the Trump Foundation has agreed to dissolve under judicial supervision. But that move, considered a small legal victory for the prosecutors, will not end the state's lawsuit against the embattled charity. CNN's Erica Orden joins us now. This does appear to be a victory nonetheless for the AG's office in New York, Erica.
Had previous dissolved, but this will mean that the charity dissolves in a manner that the AG's office was seeking under judicial supervision, as you mentioned, and with the Attorney General's office able to review the recipients of the charity's assets. It currently has about $1.7 million in assets, according to its most recent tax filing.
And what is the significance of this as we look at the big picture here, Erica? What exactly does this mean as it pertains to the Russia investigation?
Well, it's not clear that it has a direct link to the Russia investigation, but it is one of the now numerous investigations that Trump and people in his orbit find themselves under. The lawsuit alleges, among other things, unlawful coordination between the charity and the president's political campaign or presidential campaign. And the lawsuit, as you mentioned, will move forward in court because it also seeks two additional outcomes. One about
on January 28, 2016, right in the middle of the Iowa caucus campaign,
Donald Trump has chosen not to attend.
Donald Trump blew off a Republican debate and held a
Okay, Erica Orden, thank you for bringing us the latest there. I want to bring in my colleague, Shimon Prokupez. This news coming, Shimon, as we are awaiting the sentencing of the president's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. Now we're learning the Trump Foundation has agreed to dissolve in this lawsuit. The president is likely watching all of this play out. This is not good news for him.
No, it's really not. And let me just quickly read the statement that the Attorney General there put out in response to this. She said, our petition detailed, these are the court records, detailed a shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing,
on January 28, 2016,
this amounted to the Trump Foundation functioning as little more than a checkbook to serve Mr. Trump's business and political interests. I mean, that are some tough words from the Attorney General. It's clear that the Trump Foundation and the president and his family wanted this to go away. They found the resolution. You know, you have to wonder, look, we've heard other issues, obviously, out of the Southern District of New York, which has been investigating campaign finance. So is this going to go away? Perhaps. But it may not end the other liabilities that could potentially affect the Trump organization. That still seems to be in the crosshairs of investigators. So certainly you're right, Pam. This is not good for Trump, for the president. There's a lot going on.
And there are 17 investigations that have arisen from the Trump-Russia investigation. This is one of them. This is according to an article written by Garrett Graff on Wired. And so it just goes to show, while the president is calling this probe a witch hunt, you're seeing outcomes like this, that now his foundation is dissolving. That was a strong rebuke from the Attorney General's office, Michael Zeldin. I want to bring you in on this, saying that this is a case of self-dealing as it pertains to the foundation. Making the claim that they were using the foundation as a personal checkbook. What do you make of this? What is the significance?
So the language that this was a pattern of illegal self-dealing is the same pattern that we're seeing in the charges with respect to the inaugural committee for domestic donors, for the inaugural committee for foreign donors, for the emoluments lawsuit of self-dealing. So we have a lot of cases against Trump and his organization and his family that allege self-dealing. And so I think the story here is that this is the first time that a government agency has essentially obtained the admission of the Trump organization that it was indeed self-dealing. And now we're going to have to see how these self-dealing allegations play out in these other lawsuits, because it's the exact same pattern, Pamela, that we're seeing, and that's what's so troubling to so many people.
And again, for our viewers just now joining us, we're learning the Trump Foundation has agreed to dissolve in this lawsuit with the Attorney General in New York. This as we await more details from inside the courtroom. Behind me as Michael Flynn, the president's former national security advisor, is in his sentencing. He is facing a judge. We'll bring you details as soon as we receive them. And breaking this hour, the White House may be bending on its $5 billion demand for a border wall. The new comments from the White House up next. A lot of news on this Tuesday. We'll be right back. And we're coming to you live right outside the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. as we await more details on the sentencing of the president's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn has just spoken in court. We are learning. I want to bring in my colleague, Shimon Prokupecz, to learn what has happened. The judge in this case spoke, Emmett Sullivan, saying that he was concerned that Michael Flynn was not warned about the repercussions of lying to the FBI and that he didn't have counsel present.
So the thing here that's important is that the judge is basically telling Michael Flynn, do you want to withdraw your guilty plea? Are you now saying that you aren't guilty of this? And so they're going through this entire exercise now of questioning him about whether or not he really is guilty. And because the judge clearly is taking an issue with what Flynn's lawyers have been arguing, that he was somehow tricked into lying. So the judge plainly asked Flynn's lawyer, was your client entrapped? Do you feel there was entrapment here? He says no, that there was no entrapment. And so now that's exactly what they're going through. There is an issue now. The judge is concerned that perhaps Michael Flynn feels he somehow was entrapped, somehow was forced to lie by the FBI. And the judge just going through that now, making sure that Michael Flynn is willing to accept responsibility for the crimes that he committed here. And so that's exactly what's going on.
The judge was almost trying to, in a sense, giving him the opportunity to withdraw his guilty plea. But Michael Flynn saying that no, in fact, he was aware that he was lying to the FBI during that January 24th interview.
The judge even asking Flynn, do you want to postpone the sentencing? And Flynn says no. He's standing firm on his decision to plead guilty to the crime. But nonetheless, a lot of people suspected that this memo, this last sentencing memo that Flynn's attorney filed, could potentially create some problems for him. And it seems as though that is true, that we are now having to go through the judge going through this entire exercise, making sure that Flynn is satisfied with his representation and that he is in fact guilty of what he says he did here.
And I want to bring in former FBI agent Asha. Just for context for our viewers, this is stemming from a filing from Michael Flynn's lawyers where they said that Michael Flynn was not warned about the repercussions of lying to the FBI before the interview, and the FBI did not recommend that he has counsel. And basically they made the argument that he was given a false sense of security. And Asha, the judge, Emmett Sullivan, in court just moments ago expressing concern about that and asking Michael Flynn if he still sticks by his guilty plea to lying to the FBI. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the judge is taking these claims seriously. Look, I mean, Flynn is trying to make some serious legal and constitutional claims that are inconsistent with a full and unconditional acceptance of responsibility for his crime, which is what a plea of guilty is. So what the judge is saying is, if you're really serious about this, then I may not be able to accept this guilty plea. And that would be a big problem for Flynn, because then he may be in jeopardy of being charged with other things that he presumably pled guilty to avoid. I just want to also make clear that as a legal matter, when someone is not in custody, when they are free to leave, when it is a voluntary interview, the FBI is under no obligation to Mirandize them, to say you have a right to a lawyer. That is for a very specific setting. And I think that here the FBI would have reasonably believed that a career government three-star general would understand, especially somebody who led intelligence agencies before, that lying to the FBI was a crime.
And Robert Mueller, in the filing just last Friday, gave a strong rebuke to Michael Flynn's lawyer, saying, look, he knows it's a crime to lie to the FBI as a three-star retired general in the Army, as the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. But what do you make of this, Michael Zeldin? If Michael Zeldin is available, I'd like to bring him in just to get his perspective. What do you make of what is playing out inside of the courtroom?
Well, so the way it works is Mueller says in the sentencing memo, I think Flynn should get little or no time. Flynn replies saying, essentially, thank you very much, but court, you should understand that the circumstances of our lie can be mitigated by the interview process. Mueller replies to that saying, absolutely untrue. So now the judge has this situation, as Asha indicated, which is, Michael Flynn, what do you want to do? Are you pleading guilty, or are you contesting the terms under which your statements were made, and thereby seeking to remove yourself from the plea bargain? And I think Flynn is quite categorically saying, no, I want this plea bargain, and I accept responsibility, and I am contrite, and I want to be sentenced to no prison time. Why his lawyers, as Jack said in the first point, why his lawyers chose to contest the terms under which he was interviewed is just a complete mystery to me. And they should have let it be, in the first instance, accepting Mueller's representation that he was substantially helpful, and let this go. So now they're in this mess, in a sense. It'll work out fine in the end. But the one good thing, in some sense, Pamela, is that it will debunk the notion that this was a conspiracy to trap Flynn into a lie. When they go through this whole hearing now, where Flynn says, I knowingly and purposefully lied, I was not entrapped, I was not set up, I was not denied counsel, then those who have been promoting this notion of a perjury trap will be, silenced, and that's good.
And among those promoting that is the President of the United States, who just tweeted earlier today that Michael Flynn was pressured into lying. I want to bring in Shimon Prokupecz because we're getting more details inside that courtroom.
Yeah, so just to tell viewers, we have producers and reporters inside, so they're reporting back to us what's going on. And essentially, this issue is now over with. It's off the table. The judge is going to accept Flynn's guilty plea. So we're now finally moving on from this issue that the defense attorneys had raised. The judge gave Flynn several opportunities to withdraw his guilty plea, several opportunities. And Flynn finally said, I would like to proceed, Your Honor. And the judge asked him, because you're guilty of this offense? And then Michael Flynn says, yes, Your Honor. And at that point, the judge accepted his guilty plea. And now we're probably going to move on to the sentencing phase, where we're going to start hearing arguments on behalf of Michael Flynn, and obviously on the special counsel's office, arguing for the jail sentence or no jail sentence that Michael Flynn is likely to face here.
I want to bring in Jim Sciutto. Jim, as the chief national security correspondent who has been following this case from the very beginning, what is your take on what we're learning?
Listen, it's a remarkable moment, Pamela, that this line that Michael Flynn was trapped into lying here is a consistent one. It's come, as you noted, from the president. It's come from Fox News, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, to GOP senators. They've talked about process crimes. They've intimated that he didn't know what he was getting into here on this. But you heard directly from the defendant's mouth there saying, no, that's not true. You heard it from the defendant's attorney there saying, no, we do not think we were treated unfairly. That is quite a counterpoint to something that forms an essential pillar of the president's argument here about a witch hunt, an investigation that's gotten out of hand, an investigation that treats people unfairly. You've seen him say that not just about Flynn, but about Paul Manafort, when the courts are finding differently. And even the defendants involved are stating under oath differently, as you saw Michael Flynn there. And I think that's an important moment in this case because it doesn't just undermine, it contradicts a line repeated by the president as recently as this morning.
And it raises the question of why Michael Flynn's attorneys tried to argue to the court that he wasn't warned by the FBI that lying to them was a crime, and therefore he was given some sort of false sense of security, when now you have Michael Flynn telling the court, look, I was aware that lying to the FBI was a crime during that interview.
Yeah, it's interesting. And listen, we were talking about this earlier in the morning with legal experts, the former Attorney General for the state of New Jersey, a point that Michael Zeldin made as well, that by raising that balloon, as Flynn's attorneys did, about the possibility that he was mistreated, how that forced the hand of the release to some degree of those 302s, the records of those interviews yesterday, to show, in fact, no, he lied willfully and was given opportunities by those FBI agents to correct that lie and did not take those opportunities, that tactic by his defense attorneys may have backfired, and the tongue lashing he appears to be getting here from the judge here, and the holding him to account on those intimations seems to be a result of that. Did that attempt to parrot the president on his mistreatment, his alleged mistreatment there, did it put them in a worse position rather than a better one?
All right, Jim Cheeto, thank you so much. Much more on this after a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are live in front of a D.C. courthouse waiting to learn the fate of the president's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. With me now, Shimon Prokupecz, who has been following this case from the very beginning. This is really a keystone moment, a culmination of sorts, and we're learning about what's playing out inside the courthouse with the judge, Emmett Sullivan, expressing concern.
Well, he was expressing concern over the briefing that Flynn's lawyers filed, claiming, obviously, that there was some trickery here by the FBI, that they were trying to get him to lie, and that, in fact, the judge simply was concerned that Michael Flynn may be innocent in all of this. And so he was giving him this opportunity to withdraw his plea. At one point, the judge said that Mr. Flynn's briefing concerned the court and called into question the circumstances of his guilty plea. And then the judge says, I cannot recall any incident where the court has ever accepted the plea of someone who maintained he was not guilty. So really the judge was just trying to make sure that, in fact, Michael Flynn is guilty, that in fact he did lie to the FBI, and that he was willing to proceed with the sentencing. That seemed to be the concern for the judge here. I think the judge clearly was surprised by the allegations that Michael Flynn's attorneys made just a few weeks ago about the FBI tricking him. And so we saw a process you don't normally see. It's not unusual, but certainly it's not a process you normally see in a court before a sentencing. Usually by now we'd already be into the sentencing hearing. We'd be hearing from the defendant, Michael Flynn in this case, or others. But certainly because this is a unique case, which the judge said, this presents a whole different set of circumstances. And I think what we saw from the judge is that he just wanted to make sure that, in fact, Michael Flynn was ready to do this today.
Judge Emmett Sullivan, known to be a government hawk, expressing concern about what Michael Flynn's attorney said in that court filing. Jack Quinn, you served as White House counsel in the Clinton administration. Just for context, how unusual is this? What does this mean that this judge essentially gave Michael Flynn several outs to withdraw his guilty plea?
Yeah, well, I think he wants to really solidify the fact that Flynn accepts responsibility, that he believes he was guilty. I'm sure he's also been probing whether or not Flynn is satisfied with his legal team, and he's been getting effective assistance of counsel. I mean, frankly, I would have been, if I were the judge, sitting there scratching my head, wondering if after lunch he's going to come in and plead ineffective assistance of counsel. But, you know, so I'm sure that he has asked this question 14 different ways, whether A, Michael Flynn believes he is guilty, and is willing to acknowledge that in open court, and secondly, that he's been well advised and had effective assistance of counsel, and is comfortable with where this is going. Now, you know, Michael Flynn is a high-value asset for the special counsel, and I frankly think that the special counsel's response to the pleading that his lawyers filed last week was relatively mild, and that, to me, underscores the fact that the special counsel puts enormous value in Michael Flynn. It makes today's activities make me wonder whether there's one more secret that Michael Flynn has. Does he have an ace up his sleeve that he might be holding on to in hopes that he'll get a pardon?
I want to bring in Michael Zeldin now. What's interesting here is, as Jack points out, Michael, he has been a very important cooperating witness to the special counsel's office, 19 proffer sessions. But if you notice in the filing on Friday, Robert Mueller did not repeat the same language that he did a few days before in not recommending any jail time for Michael Flynn.
Exactly right. What you saw was, in the first memorandum by Mueller, he writes that he provided substantial assistance a sentence in the low end of the guideline range, including the possibility of no incarceration, would be appropriate. Then Flynn files this motion contesting the terms under which he was interviewed. Mueller comes back with a rebuke of that, and then in his final sentence he says, "We still think that a sentence in the low end of the range would be appropriate, but does not repeat that language, including the possibility of no incarceration." So you don't think that Mueller does anything accidentally. And so maybe there is a signaling to Flynn, if you don't accept responsibility, if you're not contrite, if you're not really on our team, then, this is the possible consequence for you. That said, I'm not sure that Sullivan will give him time, but it's startling to me that there was this difference in recommendation between the two pleadings that Mueller filed.
All right, Michael Zeldin, thank you for bringing your analysis. Much more after this quick break as we wait to learn the fate of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. We'll be right back. Inside a federal court in Washington, D.C. And right now, a big moment for Robert Mueller's special counsel, and the Russia investigation is playing out in a courtroom right behind me. Right now, we are waiting for a judge to give President Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn his sentence for lying to the FBI about conversations he had with the Russian ambassador. Flynn arrived in court just a short time ago, accompanied by his wife. He faces up to 6 months in prison, but the special counsel has recommended no prison time, citing his extensive and substantial cooperation with the Russia investigation and other federal probes. And not surprisingly, President Trump seems to be watching closely, commenting on Twitter, quote, "Good luck today in court to General Michael Flynn. Will be interesting to see what he has to say despite tremendous pressure being put on him about Russian collusion in our great and obviously highly successful political campaign. There was no collusion." I want to bring in my colleague, CNN's crime and justice reporter, Shimon Prokupecz. Shimon, we've been all over this case from the very beginning. This is a keystone moment. The president's former national security advisor being sentenced. What do we expect today?
Yeah, it certainly is. It's kind of a bookend in some ways to this investigation. Michael Flynn, one of the first cooperators for the special counsel, played an immense role here in this investigation. Special counsel has said as much themselves, saying how he was provided substantial assistance, key words in this investigation. And really, I think what we should expect today is to hear from Michael Flynn. Remember, he's been silent throughout this entire year since he's pleaded guilty and started cooperating. It certainly will be interesting to see how he addresses the lies. There's always been this mystery as to why Michael Flynn chose to lie. Does that get addressed in court today? What will the special counsel say about his cooperation? Do they go into more detail about the assistance he's provided? Obviously, they haven't said much, but anytime they speak, it carries a certain weight. So we'll see if they go into any further detail. And then finally, the judge. This judge is known for saying a lot of things. He's known for liking to speak his mind. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about this. Michael Flynn's attorneys were arguing that he was tricked into lying. How does all that get addressed in light of the memos that were released last night? And then ultimately, I think it's fair to say that everyone expects, including the special counsel's office probably, for Michael Flynn to get probation or no jail sentence here and be free and be able to walk out of this courtroom. And then we'll see what happens. But certainly this part of the investigation, the Michael Flynn, his cooperation, anything that he's been doing for the special counsel comes to an end today and ends this part of the investigation. Significant for sure.
Michael Flynn, 19 proffer sessions with Robert Mueller's office. That is a significant amount of times that he has met with the special counsel's office. And last night, we got a more complete picture of his lies to the FBI on that interview, January 24th, where he basically lied on a couple of occasions. And also, he even lied about having knowledge of the sanctions. What did we learn?
Yeah, he ultimately, you could, for lack of really a better words, he played dumb with the FBI agents. It's almost as if he didn't know anything they were talking about. Claimed he was on vacation in the Dominican Republic, so he didn't remember a lot of things. But what's really weird is that Flynn knew that the FBI was coming in there to talk to him about the Russians, about his conversations with Russians, because in a phone call with the former deputy FBI director, Andrew McCabe, he said, yeah, you want to come over here and talk to me about the Russians, and it's likely you know what I said. So again, we don't know what happened. Why was he sitting in that room at the White House when Peter Strzok was questioning him? Why was he lying? And what we learned is when they started asking Michael Flynn questions, detailed questions about his conversation with Kislyak, whether or not they talked about sanctions, whether or not they talked about the retaliation by the Russians against the U.S. for expelling all those Russians, the Obama administration in 2016, whether or not there were conversations about that. And Kislyak denying that, essentially saying he didn't have those kinds of conversations with Kislyak. Flynn denying it. He also lied about the UN resolution issue and whether or not he had conversations about that. All things that are very puzzling, certainly to everybody. And I'm sure it was for FBI agents who, while may have said they didn't believe he was lying at the time, it's clear based on what the special counsel has said, what the information has laid out, what the criminal charges all laid out, was that he was lying.
And he pleaded guilty to lying, which is why he is here today, getting ready to be sentenced by a judge. And that is still the remaining question at this hour. Why did he lie? As you pointed out, Shimon, he told the deputy FBI director that the FBI probably knew what his conversation with Kislyak was all about before that interview. So as we await more details from inside the courthouse, and of course we will be bringing you updates as soon as we get them, I want to bring in my panel. We have several people with us this hour. CNN legal analyst Michael Zeldin. He served as a special assistant to Robert Mueller at the Justice Department. Asha Rangappa, former FBI special agent, and CNN legal and national security analyst, and CNN legal analyst Jack Quinn, who served as White House counsel in the Clinton administration. Jack, I want to go to you first as we await more details from inside the courthouse. Give us some perspective here. The former national security advisor is about to be sentenced for lying to the FBI about conversations with the Russian ambassador, a three-star general who once ran the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he is the first former White House official to be sentenced in the Russia probe. Have we ever seen anything like this before?
No. This is baffling on so many different levels. As you point out, he was part of the intelligence community. He should have known, I'm sure he did know, that conversations with the Russian ambassador are apt to be monitored by our intelligence community. How he might have thought that his conversation with the Russian ambassador would not be part of that monitoring is a great mystery. Why, despite that, he chose to lie. Why, despite all of that, he chose to allow his counsel recently to go into court and say, well, he was tricked into lying, that this was some kind of perjury trap. It's as if his defense to speeding in his car is that that he ran into a speed trap and he shouldn't have been fined because the fact that he was going 80 miles an hour is explained by the fact that the police put a trap up there for him. It's just baffling. Now, there are a couple of different explanations, and they might be wild, and I have no basis for putting them out there, but, it's entirely possible that, like Paul Manafort, he's trying to have it both ways. He's still somehow trying to curry favor with the president in the event that he needs or wants or would benefit from a pardon down the road. That's plausible. I'm not saying it's likely, but, you never know what could be in the back of a mind who's come up with the conduct that Michael Flynn has recently. So, we'll see. I really think it was unwise of him, frankly, to allow his lawyers to lodge this defense that he was tricked into saying the things he did. I don't think that the judge will respond well to that. But we'll see.
we shall see. And you mentioned the president. He clearly is watching things play out very closely, and he weighed in this morning on Twitter saying, good luck today in court to General Michael Flynn. Will be interesting to see what he has to say, despite tremendous pressure being put on him about Russian collusion. In our great and obviously highly successful political campaign, there was no collusion. Asha, I want to bring you in. The president seems to be saying that this was a case of entrapment, that Michael Flynn was essentially pressured into lying. What is your response as a former FBI agent?
I think that's hogwash. I read that 302 that was released by Mueller's team last night, and Michael Flynn was anything but pressured into lying. In fact, the FBI agents who interviewed him reminded him of conversations that he had that they were asking him about that he initially would not disclose. So they were trying to prompt his memory, trying to get him to, talk about things that they knew about that he was trying to conceal. They even used his own words that he had used in conversations. And what is really telling is what Mueller said in the sentencing memo, that Flynn was committed to his story, and that he wasn't even sweating it. He wasn't showing any signs of deception. And from a counterintelligence perspective, this is really concerning, because this means that there is already a cover story that has been decided upon that this guy is sticking to, no matter what the FBI was going to help him out or give him prompts on. So this was a bed that he made, and now he has to lie in it.
He was committed to the story that he had told other White House officials, including the vice president, who then went out and told the American people this lie. Michael, I want to bring you in on this. With the president's tweet this morning, do you believe he is sending a signal to Flynn or anyone else here? Of course, it raises the question about a potential pardon.
Well, it can be read that way, for sure. When you juxtapose what he said about Michael Cohen calling his cooperation that of a rat, and Michael Flynn being that of a sort of a brave soldier. But I think it's, the horse is out of the barn. Flynn has given his testimony. Mueller knows what Flynn has had to say about all the aspects of the case that Flynn has knowledge with respect to. So it's not as if he can influence Flynn's testimony any further. Flynn will get a chance to talk perhaps in court today before he's sentenced, and I'm sure he'll just be repentant for what he did and hope for mercy from the court. So I'm not exactly sure what the president's, sort of message to Flynn is at this point, given that it's too late in the day to prevent Mueller from learning what Flynn has to say.
It will be interesting to hear what Michael Flynn has to say, if anything. He has stayed under the radar since he pleaded guilty to lying, although he has spoken quite frequently with Robert Mueller's team, 19 proffer sessions. He has offered substantial assistance, according to court documents, in the Russia investigation and other federal probes. Everyone stick around. We'll have much more on Flynn's sentencing just ahead. Plus, other news coming out is the White House bending on the border wall as we race towards a potential government shutdown. New comments from the White House may have just changed everything. Stay with us. We'll be right back.